The narratives told to the general masses around the world through official lines, through mainstream media, is extremely powerful. It is what caused a situation like Bono to go onto the Joe Rogan podcast and talk about USAID with what I would call limited understanding of the full picture.
300,000 people have already died from just this cutoff of USAID. So there's food rotting in boats, in warehouses. What is that? That's not America, is it?
See, a guy like that uses his fame, his philanthropy, his opportunities to be on podcasts just like the Joe Rogan podcast and share a perspective that does not even come close to the true dark truth. I myself understand, growing up mostly in the West, I thought I really understood the shape of the world. But being in Africa and starting this YouTube channel has let me know that there is such a dark and insidious level of behavior happening by neo-colonial powers. And I think most people out there just do not understand how dark and to what lengths these guys are willing to go to. So in this video, I'm going to do my best to uncover this dark underbelly, telling the true story of how USAID actually works and how it's possible for you, for me, for Bono to get the complete wrong picture of a highly sophisticated game designed to suck Africa dry. For those of you that don't know, my name is TJ. I am Nigerian and British mixed. And on this channel, we talk about African geopolitics. Have you ever seen a movie or a TV show about superheroes? There's a popular one called The Boys, where the heroes are famous all over the world. They have movie deals, merchandise, and the government tells everyone how great they are. They are seen as the ultimate symbol of goodness and American strength. They smile for the cameras, save people in staged events, and talk about truth and justice. But behind the curtain, there is a dark secret. These heroes are not good. They are corrupt, violent, and they work for a massive, powerful corporation. This corporation uses the hero's good guy image to make billions of dollars. They secretly start conflicts and then send their heroes in to solve them. They use their power to overthrow governments, control markets, and crush anyone who gets in their way. The entire image of heroism is a lie, a beautiful story told to the public so they don't see the ugly truth happening in the shadows. This might sound like just a TV show, but this story, this structure, is a powerful way to understand something very real that has been happening in Africa for decades. The heroic organization in our story is called USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. And the dark corporate reality it may be hiding is a system of control designed to keep Africa in a state of dependency, ensuring that its vast wealth of resources continues to flow to the West. To understand this, we have to start with the public image, the story we are all told. We have all seen the pictures. We have heard the emotional speeches. One of the most famous voices for this cause is the singer Bono. He has stood before world leaders and argued with passion that programs funded by American aid have saved millions of lives in Africa. He talks about programs like PEPFAR, which provides medicine for people with HIV and AIDS. He presents us with a very simple, very powerful choice. Either we give aid or people will die. It is a compelling story. It makes people in the West feel good, like they are part of something great. It paints America as a hero on the world stage, a force for good. And for many people, this is where the story ends. They see the posters, they hear the emotional appeal, and they believe in the hero. But what if that is just the movie trailer? What if that story is only a small part of a much bigger, much darker picture? The first clue that something is wrong comes when you follow the money. We are told that this aid is for the poorest people on earth. But study after study has shown that only a tiny fraction of this money ever reaches the people it is meant for. Some studies suggest that as little as 17% of aid actually gets to the intended recipients. So if 17 cents of every dollar reaches a person in need, where does the other 83 cents go? The documents and evidence suggest it disappears into a maze of high administrative costs, hugely inflated contracts given to well-connected companies, and in some cases, outright theft. It is a system that seems designed to lose money, to make it impossible to track. This system has a name. It's called the NGO economy. If you visit major African cities like Nairobi or Luanda, you can see it with your own eyes. You will see brand new shiny office buildings and luxury apartment complexes where rent is paid in US dollars. An apartment might cost $300,000 in a city where the average person earns less than $1,000 a year. Who lives in these places? Who can afford them? It's not the local people. It is a small, protected class of people. Some are Western expatriates, others are a tiny local elite who work for these non-governmental organizations or NGOs. Their salaries are paid by foreign aid money. They live a life completely separate from the economy of their own country. This creates a kind of economic apartheid, a world where one group lives in a bubble of foreign cash, while the vast majority of people struggle with rising prices and a lack of opportunity. This NGO economy does something else that is deeply damaging. It changes the dreams of young people. When you grow up in this system, you might not dream of becoming a doctor or an engineer or an entrepreneur who builds industries for your own country. The smartest career move, the way to get one of a handful of high-paying jobs, is to go work for the aid industry. Your job becomes to prepare PowerPoint slides, attend workshops in fancy hotels, and write reports that justify the existence of the system. You become a manager of your own people's poverty, not a builder of your nation's prosperity. This system does not build independence, it builds dependence. So while the vast majority of the money disappears into this strange artificial economy, something else is happening. All across the continent, new armed groups keep appearing. Every few months, it seems, a new rebel army or terror group emerges in some of the poorest parts of the world. Yet these groups are not poor. They have expensive military equipment. They have machine guns, satellite phones, and sometimes even military drones. Where does a new rebel group in the Sahel or Central Africa get the money for this kind of hardware? In economies where there is very little legitimate money coming in, huge sums of cash are somehow finding their way into the hands of people who cause chaos and instability. The argument is that this is not a coincidence. The money that disappears from the aid budget, laundered through a complex system of front companies and offshore bank accounts, could be the very money that is used to arm these groups. To understand how this is possible, we need to look at the structure of USAID itself. It is called an independent agency, but this independence is the key to its usefulness. Unlike the CIA, which, for its most sensitive covert operations, needs a direct order from the President of the United States, USAID does not. It can operate in a gray area with very little oversight from Congress. If members of Congress ask too many questions, they can be told that the operations are too sensitive and that revealing information could put lives at risk. This creates a perfect layer of what is called plausible deniability. It allows the State Department or the CIA to get things done without leaving their fingerprints. If an operation goes wrong and is exposed to the public, the White House can simply say, "We didn't know." This was a rogue USAID program. It's a shell company for foreign policy. The dirtiest jobs, the ones that are too risky even for the spies, can be outsourced to the people who are supposedly there to help. Let's look at a clear example. In Cuba, USAID launched an operation to create a secret fake version of Twitter called Zunzuneo. The plan was to attract hundreds of thousands of young Cubans to the platform by offering them sports scores, music, and news. Once the platform reached a critical mass of users, the algorithm would be secretly changed. It would start pushing revolutionary messages and anti-government content, all designed to trigger a Cuban spring, a street revolution to overthrow the government. The money for this operation was officially designated for humanitarian aid in Pakistan. Money for Pakistan was secretly moved through a maze of contractors and offshore bank accounts, just like the ones the CIA has used for decades to fund a regime change operation in Cuba. When it was exposed, the US government denied it was their policy. It was just USAID, the independent agency, gone wrong. This was not an isolated incident. In Pakistan and Afghanistan, the US military wanted to collect biometric data, iris scans, and fingerprints of the entire population. This was part of a military doctrine called identity dominance. But you cannot force millions of people to give you their biometric data. So what did they do? They used a humanitarian front. The CIA, working through USAID-style programs, set up fake vaccine clinics. People believing they were getting healthcare for their children would come to the clinics and their data would be secretly collected. They used the promise of health to carry out a military intelligence operation. This single act did enormous damage to legitimate healthcare efforts all over the world, breeding distrust that lasts to this day. But for the system, it was a success. It achieved its goal under the perfect cover of humanitarian aid. This brings us to the most important question. Why? Why would a system be designed to work this way? The answer, from a pro-sovereignty perspective, is about control. Specifically, the control of resources and the prevention of true African development. There is a famous and chilling document from the US government written in 1974. It was a national security memo known as NSSM 200, also called the Kissinger Report. The report states very clearly that the population growth of developing countries that are rich in natural resources is a direct threat to the national security of the United States. It argues that if these countries, like Nigeria, for example, were to grow their populations and develop their own industrial capacity, they would start using their own resources for their own people. This would mean the West would no longer have cheap, easy access to the raw materials that fuel its own economy. The conclusion was clear. The development of these nations must be managed, and in some cases, prevented. This is the cold logic that may sit at the heart of the system. The goal is not to eliminate poverty. The goal is to manage it. You don't want a country to be so chaotic that it cannot be controlled, but you also do not want it to become so strong that it no longer needs you. You want it to be perpetually dependent. You do this by creating instability. You fund armed groups that destabilize regions that are rich in oil or cobalt or coltan. This instability prevents any local government from building factories to process those resources themselves. It ensures that the only way to get those resources out of the ground is to make a deal with a Western multinational corporation, which will then extract the raw materials and take them away for a very low price. This economic control is backed up by political control. USAID and its network of NGOs don't just deliver aid, they deliver policy. They fund organizations called civil society groups, which often function as shadow governments. They have more money, more influence, and more access to lawmakers than the actual citizens of the country. They push for policies that benefit foreign corporations. We saw an example in Nigeria where a hearing was held to change the constitution to allow for GMOs. The only groups present at that sovereign hearing were NGOs funded by foreign entities like the Gates Foundation and USAID. They were there to influence the laws of a sovereign nation to open its markets for foreign agricultural companies. The system also uses a tactic called legal warfare. They fund organizations like the World Justice Project, which creates a global network of judges and prosecutors. On the board of this organization have sat US Supreme Court justices. This network can be used to pressure the legal systems of other countries. They can lean on judges to prosecute a political leader who is not friendly to US interests or to rule that a certain law protecting local industry is unconstitutional. It's another way of controlling a country from the inside, all under the noble-sounding banner of promoting the rule of law. And when a population gets tired of the corruption and the poverty, and a real organic protest movement begins, the system has a plan for that too. This is what we may have seen with the End SARS protest in Nigeria. What began as a genuine outcry against police brutality was quickly infiltrated by this network of civil society actors. Suddenly, the protest was less about demanding real change and more about performance. It became a giant party with free food, music, and celebrity photo opportunities. People started fighting over who was the leader and who got the credit. The raw revolutionary energy of the movement was channeled into a distraction, and it eventually fell apart without achieving its core goals. This is a classic tactic of subversion. You don't crush a movement from the outside, you rot it from the inside. So who are the ultimate winners in this system? It's not the people of Africa. The documents and evidence point to the corporate beneficiaries. The military-industrial complex profits by selling weapons to the conflicts that this system helps create. The big technology companies like AT&T gain access to new markets. In Syria, for example, the new US-backed leader, who himself was the head of a designated terror group, pledged to give all the country's wireless contracts to AT&T in exchange for the US lifting sanctions. The big extraction industries, oil, gas, and mining companies get access to Africa's immense natural wealth. They get the resources and the infrastructure that is built with aid money, like a new road, often goes from the new mine to the port, not from a village to a hospital. It is a system where a handful of powerful corporations, the Vought Internationals of our world, are the primary clients. This creates a series of deep, systemic contradictions. Let's call them paradoxes. First, there is the productivity paradox. Africa is a continent with the resources and the people to be one of the wealthiest places on earth. Yet, it is home to widespread poverty. This poverty, the argument goes, is not natural. It is manufactured, a result of deliberate policies designed to prevent development. Aid is presented as the solution to poverty, but it may actually be the system that perpetuates it. Second, there is the democracy paradox. America says it promotes democracy around the world, but in practice, it often means subverting actual democratic sovereignty. Elections are only considered legitimate if they produce a leader who is friendly to US interests. A free civil society is only free as long as it serves that same agenda. And finally, there is the security paradox. America says it is fighting a war on terror, yet evidence from Syria and other regions shows it has, at times, funded and armed the very same terrorist organizations it claims to be fighting. It promotes stability while deliberately causing instability. It provides security assistance that ultimately undermines a nation's real security. But the story does not end there, because across the continent, something is changing. There is an awakening. For decades, Africa was under an information monopoly. We were told one story about the world, and we were given one model for development. The internet and the free flow of information have shattered that monopoly. More and more people are becoming aware of these neo-colonial systems. There is a growing rejection of the old aid models that create dependency. Nations are beginning to build new relationships, creating alternative partnerships with countries like China, Russia, and, most importantly, with each other in regional blocs. The old colonial borders drawn on a map by Europeans a century ago to divide us are becoming less important than the shared future we must build for ourselves. The system of control we have discussed is vulnerable because it requires secrecy to function. It depends on people believing in the heroic story, the movie poster. As that story falls apart and the ugly truth is exposed, the system loses its power. The future of Africa will and should not be decided in Washington or any other foreign capital. It will be decided here by Africans. The path will be difficult. Undoing decades of this system will not be easy. There may be short-term pain as we wean ourselves off the drug of dependent aid, But the long-term goal is not just to survive. It is to build strong, industrialized, sovereign nations that use their own resources to enrich their own people. The old game of colonial control is still being played, just with different rules and a different name. But today, we can see the game for what it is. And once you can see the game, you can finally choose not to play. I would love to know if you guys are fully aware of the things that I spoke about in this video. And if there's anything I've missed, please feel free to put it in the comments section. But if you have nothing to say, would it be too much for me to ask you to write the words, "No more aid"? It just lets me know that you watched the video to the end, you like the channel, you want me to continue. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.